Y.
The what, 92nd Street line?
The 92nd Street Y.
We are now live at SLATE Contemporary. Hi, everybody. And so why don't we go ahead and get started? If I could ask the participants to mute themselves who are not talking. So that'll be me.
All right. Thank you for joining us this evening for conversation in conjunction with SLATE Contemporary's current exhibition, History and Romance, which is on view through February 28th at our gallery in Uptown, Oakland, California. The show presents 3 contemporary artists who use historical painting as a jumping off point for creating contemporary photography that inspires awe and wonder. Through a mastery of their medium, these 3 artists ask us to take a closer look at the historical and romanticized images embedded in our cultural consciousness while questioning what art is and how we as viewers experience it. This evening, I'm going to offer a brief biographical introduction for each of the artists before handing the presentation off to the exhibition's curator, Lucy Spencer. Lucy will take a few minutes to engage with each of the artists who are joining us from Nashville, Tennessee, Fort Myers, Texas, and San Francisco, California, before opening up the platform for a discussion between the artists. If you're a viewer watching the live stream on YouTube, I believe that you can submit questions for the artists via YouTube's chat function, and we'll try to add them into the mix during the joint conversation at the end. First, going to hear from Christy Lee Rogers. Christy's works have been exhibited internationally in Paris, London, Mexico City, Shanghai, Sao Paulo, Johannesburg, and across the United States. She has been featured in major magazines, including Vogue, Vanity Fair, Harper's Bazaar, Elle Decor, The Independent, Icon, and Fahrenheit, among many others. Her famous piece, The Reckless Unbound, is currently housed at Longleat House in the United Kingdom. This is a stately home, which is the seat of the Marquess of Bath, and also home to Renaissance gems of the Italian masters, like Titian's Rest on the Flight into Egypt. Rogers' art has been featured on several album covers, and in 2013, her images were selected for the 2013-14 performance season of the Angers Opera House in France. She has won dozens of international awards, culminating most recently in 2009 when she won Open Photographer of the Year at the Sony World Photography Awards. While she returns to Hawaii, where she originally grew up for most of her shoots, she currently lives in Nashville, Tennessee, or near Nashville, I think now, where she also works as a filmmaker, musician, and a mother. Carlos Gamez de Francisco was born in post-revolutionary Cuba and started painting 8 hours a day when he was 15 years old. In Cuba, he was exposed to figurative arts by the presence of the Russian Academy, eventually learning to paint in a highly representational style. Carlos continued his art education as an adult with a distinguished scholarship at the Art Institute of Chicago and lived in Kentucky for many years before moving to Fort Myers, Texas. He has received numerous awards, including the Fine Art Photographer of the Year at Moscow International Photo Awards, the Honorable Mention at International Color Awards, and Tokyo International Photo Awards. He has had solo shows at many important institutions and has worked in the collections of the 21C Museum in Louisville, Kentucky, the Fashion Resource Center at the Art Institute of Chicago, the Museum and Performing Arts Center in Miami, Florida, and the Louisville Metro Hall, as well as in hundreds of private collections worldwide. Carol Inez Charney holds a BA in painting from UC Santa Cruz and an MFA in photography from San Jose State University. Carol has been exhibiting with George Billis Gallery in New York and Los Angeles since 2006, with SLATE in Oakland since 2009, and with Foster White Gallery in Seattle since 2015. She has also shown with galleries in Sweden and in San Francisco. Her work is in private and corporate collections throughout the United States, including those of AT&T, Microsoft, Morgan Stanley, and the U.S. Department of State, to name just a few. Her work has also been featured in multiple magazines, including Fahrenheit, Adbusters, and Art Limited. Originally from New York, she currently lives and works in San Francisco. So I just want to say we feel so blessed and so honored to have such accomplished artists working with us, sharing their work with us, generously sharing their work, and allowing us to, giving us the opportunity to hang it in our space and to share it with our base of collectors and art appreciators. And we hope that this is an opportunity for new people to discover your work and how rich it really is. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Lucy, who can talk a little more about the show itself and some of the themes running through it, how each of the artists have taken those on in their own way.
Thank you, Danielle. Hi, everybody. I'm Lucy Spencer here at SLATE Contemporary. I'm sitting in the middle of our beautiful exhibition. You can only see two pieces behind me, but Carolyn will be showing images by the artists as we go. So we're going to start with Christy Lee Rogers. So Christy, hi, welcome. You're muted at the moment. There we go. Hi.
Hello.
Hi. Good. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you.
Yes. Well, to get right to it,
Yes.
we have three beautiful pieces of yours hanging here in the gallery space. And in all of them, there's a strong sense of light, motion, that, figures, fabric, things like that. But predominantly there's water. Water is part of your process. It's part of your history, as Danielle mentioned, creating your work in Hawaii, which is, I believe, where you were raised. And I'm curious as well, how does it play into the subject matter of your work? Is it relevant to today's discussion, or is it more part of your heritage and the creation of the pieces?
It's funny because I always think of water as sort of like a collaborator. It's a medium that I'm using, and it's a life force that I feel just sort of takes a regular image in reality and just sort of changes everything, softens everything. And so it's more of a collaborator. I mean, it's definitely something that I don't think about very much anymore. It's just very natural, but I never wanted to shoot outside of the water the same way that I did in the water, so it's almost like just a part of me now, and I love water so much, I feel like it's a very special, it is the most special element. Without it, we would not be here. We need it so much, and we take it for granted, that it's just going to always be there and it's always going to be clean. So, nowadays I'm sort of getting into that and trying to figure out, like, what can I do to help, help the oceans and water just in general on the planet.
Thank you. I love that you use the word collaborator because it makes it really feel alive and like there's this life force behind it. The ocean and the water is such a powerful thing. How did that affect you, having that body of water in your life? And now here you are working with it day in and day out from a young age.
It was really natural when I grew up. I didn't really think about it so much. It wasn't until I left Hawaii and I was living in the city and there was no rain and I just started to get a little depressed, and then I'd go back to Hawaii and the first thing I'd jump in the ocean and I would feel just like this energy come off of me, so anytime I'm stressed, I just would take a shower and the water is just pounding on my back and I can just already feel just this release, so it's in that way that I never really, no one ever asked me about it before. It was just very natural. And I think a lot of people feel the same way, but I don't know. I just feel like I have this bond with water, you know, and it's like the movie Moana, you know, where the water is alive. It's exactly true. That's it. I got it.
I love it.
Yeah.
I can see this relationship and intimacy with the figure and the water in your pieces. So
Oh, yeah.
as we have in front of us, we have your piece, A Force of Nature. And in this one, we see just hints of a figure. So much of this is abstraction with fabric, with light and movement.
Yes.
The two other works, as we go through, we have Forget Me Not, which is more appendages, hands, legs, a little more power, a little more, understanding and detail in those hands.
Right.
And then the third piece we have is Play of Angels, which is very much more perceptively a person. I see a torso, I see maybe what could be some sort of mask. So how do you decide through all of these shots and all this video, how much of a person are you going to put in there? How human is it versus abstract?
Yeah, it's funny. I sort of go back and forth between the two. I love figurative. I feel like I definitely need to see a person in there. I do like capturing the human form and understanding myself and humanity through the images, but I don't mind if faces blur or feet disappear. And I mean, it's funny because maybe I've gone a little bit too far in some of them where I just sort of let go, and I think sometimes things can be too perfect. And of course, we're all searching for that perfection. And I don't actually think it really does exist. And you can drive yourself crazy trying to search for it. And so in a way, I'm trying to just sort of let go and feel the works. Like in this one, I love that she is definitely one with the fabrics, and there's this sort of chaos, but then there's this softness at the bottom, and I also think that is water and that is life, it's both chaos and peace and beauty. Like there is this yin and yang and this dichotomy that goes back and forth. And I don't know if it would be as exciting without it, that you sort of have to push through these barriers. And the ocean is very rough. I mean, it's dangerous and it can kill you. And at the same time, it can nourish you and feed you, and I think that's what I'm trying to put into these images, is that feeling of what I'm experiencing myself, or my thoughts about life in general.
Well, very well said. As a California girl born and raised, I can relate to that power of the ocean, the sense of vitality and the life in it. And I love how you've been able to express that visually as well, also using other color of fabric and light and motion of the water. You get that intensity and that power, and you have the softness and the peacefulness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Before we move along, is there any other last thing you'd like to mention about your work while we have you here?
No, not necessarily. I mean, I just, I love listening to the other artists and what inspires people. And I mean, there's a lot happening right now too. So it's interesting to kind of come back to these works, right? Because I'm actually working on a new collection right now, which is completely, I mean, it's still in the water, but it's completely out there, it's like a whole nother realm. So it's interesting to come back and then, and I can't wait to hear the other artists too. And I just want to say thank you so much for the show.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I think perfect moment to move on to Carlos Gamez de Francisco in this sense of sort of chaos and peace and refinement and sort of this roughness. To me, that goes very neatly into your series, The Power of the Powerless. We're seeing one right behind us. Also, hi, Carlos. Hi, good to see you. Thank you for coming.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Thank you.
I love we have the same piece behind us too.
Yes.
So in this series, Carlos, you have chosen and worked with young Cuban models in their homes using items from their homes that vary from everyday objects, and then create this sense of royalty and power in their gaze, in the composition. And I think there's just something so poignant about this sort of trash into treasure moment of how you're able to take, these everyday objects and then make them into this sense of just pure like luxury and royalty. And these young women radiate the sense of power, have this strong gaze about them. So I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about why you chose to use these everyday objects, and maybe how that started for you.
Yes, so I knew I wanted to be an artist since I was a child. And when I started my training, I noticed that most of the pieces in museums are portraits. So in the past, only the royalty was able to afford a portrait by a very recognized artist. So I went to Cuba. So I left Cuba when I was 21. And in one of my visits, when I was visiting my family, I wanted to depict the youngest generation, because when I left the country, everything was completely different. For example, when I left, when I was a child, it was illegal in Cuba to listen to the Beatles or any English music, or to watch any movies in English. And my parents, when they listened to the Beatles, they asked me to don't say anything in the school because they could be in jail just for listening to the music. Also, we didn't have access to internet, or we were not able to buy a car or a house. So we have to be the 2-3 generations in the same house, and because nobody was able to afford the house. So also we didn't have access to cell phones. But then like everything started changing in the country, and always the youngest generation is the one that is gonna take control in the future. So I went back to my country, and I asked, I wanted to ask questions to people who were between 18 to 25 years old. And then I went to their houses and I asked them permission to check everywhere. And I checked in their closets, in their kitchens, and I built the dresses that looks like dresses from the royalty, from the Renaissance or Baroque paintings. And I built with found objects because I wanted to depict them in a situation of power. They have the power to change a country. And so that was the goal. And then, so I asked them to pose in the way they feel with the power they have. And that was one of the most amazing series I really enjoyed, because when I made a photo, I don't think as a photographer, I think as a painter. So everything, the composition rules, the colors, and the dresses is based in my training as a painter. So that series changed my way I see art. And then every time I came back to my country, I tried to continue the series.
I think that's so, I love that you allowed them to choose their poses too, what made them feel the most powerful. I think we really can see that in their expressions. Another piece that we have here is from your most recent series called Knowledge Destroys Fear, which I do think is pretty strongly related. It is still of these young people of the same age group. Is that right? In Cuba?
Yes.
Yeah. Except for in this case, rather than found objects, these pieces are a bit more staged. They have more of a traditional set to them. And I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about that progression. One more thing to note is that I know that this young man in this image that we have growing roses is a social media influencer. So somebody who is able to reach beyond the confines of his location and really access his power through the internet. So what inspired you to make this shift of you still have these young people, and yet the way you're allowing them to express has changed? Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, about 2 years ago, there was a big protest in Cuba, and it was the first time people from all the cities went out and they were protesting, they were asking for freedom. And we never saw that before, because everything there is very difficult. So, when that happened, the government so the internet and the cell phones are controlled by the government. and then they shut down everything, even the electricity. So nobody was able to communicate. And so people couldn't know what was happening in a different city. But then the influencers, they were doing a very good job trying to connect the people because they have a big audience in their Instagram account or their YouTube channels or Facebook. So my goal was in this series to depict the influencers, people that I know they have a voice that could be listened. Everybody is listened, but then they have a voice that is easier to spread. So then in this case, in that photography, I call it the series Knowledge Destroy Fear, because I think when we finally have the knowledge, we are able to change things. We're able to build a future. When we know the past, we can build the future. So because they're also influencers, they're more comfortable in front of a camera. So they will post different, they will act different because that's the way they are. So I let them to be as free as they want in front of the camera.
Great, thank you. In this piece in particular, Growing Roses, that we have here, which is just one of many of the extensive aspect of this amazing series. I know that there is a poem behind it, and I was just, it's a wonderful story, and I was wondering if you could tell a story about the poem Growing Roses and what that means to you and what that means to this young man in your country.
Yes, there is the national hero of Cuba. His name is Jose Marti, and he was a very bright man. He was in charge of the Cuban revolution before this cold revolution. So it was in the 19th century. But he was a writer. He was an amazing. He was very good at writing poetry, and I don't know how he has time to write so much because there are so many things, so many books that he wrote. And there is a poem that every Cuban knows, and it's about a white rose. And so if you ask any Cuban, they will tell you that they know the poem. So it's like something very typical of my country. I don't know, maybe in the United States, people will talk about something very specific. So that is something very specific about Cuba that we all know and is part of our culture.
Great. And what, if you could talk to all these young people that you've been working with and just share them one message about how you feel inspired for them and for their future, what would you like to tell them?
Well, I think we all could make, when we have a dream, we all could achieve our goals. So in 19th century, when the national Cuban hero, he failed the revolution because people were not united. They wanted to be in their own province, fighting for what they thought it was important, but they never united and said, let's go together and fight together. So I think when we have any goal, we could achieve it. But if we work hard, and also if we have some help and we work together.
Great. Thank you so much, Carlos. That's a wonderful, wonderful note to end on for now. And I think we'll move on to Carol Inez Charney. Thank you, Carlos. Hi, Carol.
Hi,
Hi, how are you tonight?
I'm good.
Good. Thank you so much for joining us. I think that Carlos his series has this interesting topic of censorship and revolution, which I think plays beautifully into your most current photography series that you've been working on called the Smoke series. I see that there's some images behind you there.
The secondhand smoke. Yeah.
Secondhand Smoke series. Thank you. So we are happy to have two of these pieces here at SLATE. And they, to my understanding, the smoke is smoke that is representing a metaphor of both historical and modern books that have been banned, censored, or maybe in the past literally burned. I think we have this beautiful interpretation here. This one is F451, which is Fahrenheit 451-1. There are a few of these. And then we also have the other piece here called The Great Gatsby. I think that the composition of the smokes is so ethereal, and the fact that you're able to then solidify and sort of stabilize something that is just so hard to capture creates this really strong sense of beauty and strength. And in this piece, The Great Gatsby, I'd like to talk about it a little bit more specifically. I see you have three main pieces of smoke, and I was wondering how that relates to the book itself, if you're trying to portray specific figures or part of the narrative, or anything about that aspect of the book.
Yeah. So in this particular piece, when I was initially starting this series, I wanted to represent the aspect of censorship that was occurring since this particular book was being banned in Alaska, The Great Gatsby. So there, I was trying to represent the kind of triad relationship that was going on, and the kind of push me, pull me thing that was happening, and the bending to different kind of directions within the relationship between the characters, and the struggle, as well as the rise of censorship was what the white smoke is really representative of in all of the pieces that are specific individual titles of books. There's always an encroaching censorship, which is this entire thing that is going on now in this country. So that's kind of what my thinking was, and that each particular character that I was representing with the smoke would be in a color, and that those, so that kind of worked that way.
I'm glad that you brought up the censorship that we're dealing with today, because that was something else I'm really curious about your book, is sort of this, maybe is there a moment that in today's sort of world of censorship or miseducation or just sort of general darkness, what inspired you to kind of take to this method of photography and experiment in this way?
It all started with the degenerate art show that occurred in Germany in 1937, where the Nazis decided that work that didn't represent German values and classical representation was to be considered degenerate and to be banned, burned, and just completely desecrated in one way or another. And so with the rise of hate, anti-Semitism, censorship that occurred from in its full force since 2016, I decided I've got to do something. And so I started with trying to do work that was all from the actual degenerate art show from 1937, but it wasn't really coming together. And the more that I kind of explored the literature, then I started thinking about Fahrenheit 451. I started thinking about the ephemeral nature of smoke, but that the smoke is really kind of all that exists of what remains of like provocative ideas. And this idea of how in this country there's such a heavy, like a heavy hand over everybody should go backwards in time and to somehow, I don't know, go back to the 1950s, yet society as a whole is in a completely other context and generation. So it's this really weird and dysfunctional clash of values. And so, I mean, just today in the New York Times, there was reference to in Orange County, California, how a school board pulled a digital library app because one of the books on there was let me get it accurate. It was called A Polar Bear in Love. And it was something a second grader found on the app. And it was about where a male polar bear asks to marry a male baby seal when he's older. And they were like, oh my God, we got to get rid of this. And then the woman says, to be clear, this is absolutely not a censorship discussion. I'm not here to restrict students' right to information and to books. This is a concern with the lack of vetting and surveillance of digital libraries. And I thought, come again? What? So it's kind of been this seeping into everything. And so my approach has been to work with smoke, which is really ephemeral and, to me, really representative of creative expression. And, the F451 series is really about the vast quantity of books that are being banned and burned. And, the different colorways within it, within the series, are representative of going from somber and horrific to more of a celebration of ideas that somehow that will triumph over.
Absolutely beautifully said. I think there's just something really special about kind of creating an archival nature out of smoke. And to me, that feels like a homage to all of the things that should be archival and yet are then removed. And so I think that I'm just really excited to have those pieces here. And I'm looking forward to seeing where that goes.
Thanks.
We have just a few more minutes together before we have all of the artists back with Danielle for a discussion. So I'd like to talk about this piece that's behind me, which is part of your After painting series. And this one is part of two that's called After Abraham Mignon 1 and 2. This is 1. Still life with flowers and a watch, and still life with fruit and oysters in a porcelain bowl. So we could get into this quite deeply, but to keep it brief, and I think that there's something really special about the sort of the morphing and the distortion that you provide the viewer away from the traditional subject matter that we know very well as a classic Dutch still life. So we have this strong sense of distortion, and how the viewer is we're no longer looking at just the flowers. We're looking at the reflection of the water, the depth of fields, how the colors have changed into new shapes in these strips. And I'm curious, how could you relate this series, this sense of distortion and change, with maybe the ephemeral nature of the smoke? This also has to do with a different way of seeing the world and maybe changing our perspective. Is that something that went in from one to the other? Or you could relate?
Not really. I think that I've been working with water and how water transforms everything, as Christy can speak to. Water really transforms everything when you're looking through water at something else. The way I work is I'm working with water on vertical glass, as opposed to the way that Christy works. And it kind of all emerged from wanting to look at landscape through a different distortion. So it wasn't just, it's a pretty landscape. And that work then evolved into the After painting work, which was really to look at things that we're all really familiar with, classical painting, and then to really kind of see it from a different perspective, and to kind of take it out of context, and then at times bring it back. So it's sort of like, oh, it's the Mona Lisa, but then there's a detail of the Mona Lisa. And when you're looking at certain really familiar imagery, but then you take it out of context, and then you sort of like rejoin it from a detail kind of marrying with the overall image, something new kind of occurs, while at the same time, I feel like it kind of speaks to contemporary painting and how contemporary abstract painting kind of functions in this way. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but that's really been my intention all along, that they're paintings that I'm photographing, making them into like new paintings, yet they're photographs. So it's kind of goes around.
It's beautiful, beautiful in between. And I do think that a lot of contemporary art is, I guess, commenting on where we came from and the history of art itself, and how can we improve as people, and how can we improve as artists, and create new things in this world.
Yeah, I think it's like on the after painting work, it's really about how when two things come together, a third thing is created.
Mhm.
So, which is different than the smoke.
Right. Great. Well, thank you, Carol. I think let's get everybody in here, and so we can talk a bit more about your work together. So we titled the show History and Romance because to us, your work all is so fresh and so modern and clean, and yet it has this strong resonance to sort of people before us, histories before us, types of art made before us. And just visually, the colors are lush. There's a lot of beautiful dark space. And you know, in this time of Valentine's Day, that to me just feels very romantic, and something nice about being together in that way. So that's just kind of why we wanted to bring you together today. And I think what I learned is that there was so much more in the combination of this element of water, distortion, political revolution, and change in ways that weren't necessarily apparent in the very beginning. So it's just been a pleasure to get everyone together in this way. And I was wondering if maybe you guys have anything you'd like to say in particular. Maybe we could start with the relationship of the smoke series to the knowledge destroys fear. And then we could talk about how water connects to works as well. So
That's not a very specific question.
Not at all.
but it is something that I guess because when we started putting this show together, we weren't as familiar with Carlos's new series, which is the one about knowledge. And so but I think it's really interesting just that common theme came out between Carlos's and Carol's work, which is so different visually, but that the importance of knowledge and the importance of knowledge to our freedom and our power in the world, and the the threat and unacceptability of curtailing that knowledge. So it's just interesting to look at it, you know, from two different perspectives, completely different visual language, and yet it's, you know, taking on a political and conceptual idea, but really saying what you need to say through photography, and through photography that's very kind of conceptualized, I'll say, right? Like none of you are documentary photographers. You're not running around taking street photography or shooting pictures of people on the street. You're creating a world for us out of your mind's eye and taking us a place that never even existed until you got there and created it in the world. You know, and so then you create this space and invite us in, and you know, and while we're there, give us things to think about, important things. I think all of you do that, so I really appreciate that as well. But it also leads back to like the importance of talking about your work, writing about work, you know, having these kinds of conversations. All of this is work that can be completely enjoyed on a completely superficial level. It's just beautiful and sensual without knowing anything that's behind it in terms of the inspiration or the politics. But to me, it just makes it so much richer when we are let into the inspiration behind it, and that we can then walk your path with you through the work and see and feel what we can only imagine you see and feel.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say that just hearing your stories and talking about your work, I just have a completely different perception. And I've seen the show, you know, so it connects me to the works, you know, and I think that's what an artist's job is. It's like you're putting something, you're trying to change the world, you know, right? We're all trying to change the world in our little way. And it's like we have a mission, and this is the way that works for us. You know, we could do it a different way, but this is our medium. And yeah, I just want to say that I really just appreciated both of your works in a different way by this conversation. So I think this was a great idea. Danielle and Lucy, thank you so much.
And between Christy and Carol, and I mean, I think we've shown you two before together, but there is also, you know, just this more formal theme of water as something that abstracts reality, softens it, separates us from it, but separates us so that we look at it more closely and engage with it more. I love hearing Christy talk about it as a collaborator, something that softens it, but is also chaotic and out of control and hard to control, you know. And I know that Carol struggles with that too in her first two series, you know, working with the liquids, kind of wanting to control them, but, you know, having to let go too, and just find where it takes you sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And and that's, you know, maybe something that's a little different from Carlos's. I'm sure Carlos has a million takes and we just see the best ones also. But when you're working with people and elements like water that are in motion, or smoke, which is also constantly changing and in motion, you know, I know that you all have to do so much work to just find that one that's, you know, that says what you want to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything else? Any other questions for each other, or any other comments? Maybe we can just finish off with a little question. We can just go around and just hear a little bit from each of you, what you're kind of like working on now, or what's next. What are you looking forward to in your work this year? We'll just close with that. Carlos, would you like to give us a little update?
Yeah, so now I'm working in a new photography series, and now I'm taking pictures of Cubans that immigrated to the United States. So that is the next, because we have, at least in Florida and in Miami, there is more than 1 million Cubans. So they have built the city, and the culture is there. It's like you go sometimes to restaurants and they don't speak English. Everybody there speaks Spanish. And it's like they brought our culture to a different country, and they are very attached to their culture. So that's the next thing that I'm working now. And when you were saying about all the photos that so when I started taking photos, I didn't have training as a photographer. So I was discovering everything by myself. And I remember I took 4,000 pictures, and I was taking pictures for 3 weeks until one day that it was raining and the lighting wasn't that good. And I put the light very close to the model, and I found the perfect lighting. So I deleted all the pictures, and I asked the models to come back, and because finally I understood that photography is everything about lighting. So so all the work for 3 weeks didn't work, and I have to start over again. And that was it was good because when I make a painting, now that I've been working for so long, everything gets easier. I make less mistakes. So it was good to be humble, to know the pictures were not good enough, and said I need to do it better.
Mhm.
Yeah, been there and done that too. Yeah, I understand.
And
I mean,
it's
it's good to make mistakes because that's how you learn and you grow. I mean, actually like making mistakes, you know, and I talk to my son about that all the time, you know, that it just pushes us forward. You have to be able to forgive yourself and not be so hard on yourself and then continue. A lot of artists, I won't say most, but a lot of artists stop, right? They get frustrated or, you know, but to push through. So the beauty, your lighting is beautiful. It's gorgeous.
Thank you.
Christy, you mentioned you're working on a new series, which is just completely different, whole next level. I mean, without giving anything away that maybe you don't want to yet, can you just tell us a little bit about kind of what you're looking forward to or working towards?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very, very close to we're going to put a little teaser out there, but I did a lot of video on this shoot. So I'm actually doing a video installation for it's a big Super Bowl party that happens to raise money. It has to do with a new cancer treatment that has to do with water. So that's why they wanted me to be involved. So literally I've got maybe 4 days to finish these video installations, but it goes along with the new collection, which is also a new series of works. And really it started just, you know, with these last 2 or 3 crazy years, right? I just sort of wanted to disappear. And so I kind of went out there and let go and kind of went off into this whole, I don't know, other universe kind of thing. It's still underwater, but I shot everything with flashlights, which was crazy. So I'm calling it bioluminescence. And, you know, it's just, I can't, I mean, I don't want to give it all away, but it's still underwater and everything, but it's just raw and otherworldly in different ways. It's still got some classical images, but then there's some really just far out craziness that happens. So I'm excited.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're looking forward to seeing it.
Yes. Thank you.
Carol, do you want to comment at all about like lighting and how you use it? And then maybe just tell us what you're currently working on or hoping to finish this year.
I'm working on expanding out my smoke series and also the water work, but I'm kind of a bit more focused on the smoke at the moment, because I feel like I haven't really cracked the code on that one yet. And I don't know, somehow I'm not done with that. The water work, I do have a lot of new images, but I feel like I'm maybe kind of finishing that up, so I'm not quite sure. And as far as lighting goes, I feel like I've been in a workshop on lighting. First, I had to learn how to work with a strobe in order to create sunlight. And that was really like, I couldn't figure it out. And then my friend Henrik Kam, who's an amazing photographer, came over and within 20 minutes was like, here, you got to do this, set that. And then, yep, and you fill card and dip. And I was like, wow. So lighting, yes, I completely understand. I mean, lighting really is key. And yeah, so I just can continue to work with that and see how I can push it further. And yeah, that's pretty much what's going on.
Great.
It seems like there's really no shortage on the attempt to censor everything, so there'll be plenty of fodder.
Yeah, it's not even funny, but
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it's not, I shouldn't be laughing, but it's just,
But that's how ridiculous it is, right? So you've got to laugh about it. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, beautiful work, everyone.
Yeah, thank you all so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, Carlos. We wish you all the best.
Okay, have a good night, everybody.
Soon.
Bye.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye. Thank you to everybody that came and watched too. I'm not